guys, Merry Christmas. I am doing a little bit of dinner prep right now. It's a little after 2, and I'm making a wild rice casserole and a roast duck. And neither of those things are terribly complicated, but they do require a little bit of prep work, several hours in advance. And so I'm a little running behind, but not too behind. It'll be fine. So first we're gonna get the wild rice casserole ready. I'm using a recipe from this cookbook, sort of, as a base. I've maligned this cookbook in the past for things not working out. This works out. It's just a little bland. So we're gonna add a few things to it that are not in the original recipe. So I'm going to start that first. So wild rice, the reason that you need to start this in advance is that wild rice needs to be soaked before you can cook it. It doesn't have to be, but it certainly helps. And so we're going to kind of aid it along in that. So typically, that recipe calls for a cup of wild rice and 2.5 cups of chicken stock or consomme, beef probably. They were calling for. I'm going to use some white rice too. I have sort of I have just a scant of some basmati rice that I had. You can use whatever white rice. But so as a result, I'm going to use a little bit more than a cup of the wild rice, okay? And, one of the best places to get wild rice is at Trader Joe's. They sell it in big bags. So I'm going to do that. An overflowing cup of that. I just kind of move it around, and I'm also going to add, I have, 1 shallot that I cut up. It worked out to a couple tablespoons, looks like. And I'm going to add some thyme. And I'm just going to kind of, pull a few, pull the what are they called? Leaves. I was woken up at 4:30, by the way. They're in there now having Nintendo tournaments. And I'm sitting here talking to you and I've got sticks in my rice. Okay. So remember, you just kind of run your hand down the thing. And what happens just now is the end, which is a little bit more soft, breaks off. And that's okay. If it's softer, then it's more digestible. So I'm just doing about, maybe 5 or 6 sprigs of that. Now another thing that's supposed to be in this recipe is mushrooms, and I thought I had fresh mushrooms and I don't, and I'm not going to the grocery store on Christmas. So I have dried mushrooms, but in order to do dried mushrooms, what do you have to do? You have to soak them, right? So I did that, and that's going to give us some of our liquid too, and that's also going to improve the flavor of this. Okay. So I have this, right? But first I'm going to take this 2 cups of chicken stock. And see, my chicken stock is pretty rich. We've talked about that before because I make it myself. So I'm going to pour that in. There's about a little over 2 cups. And then I'm going to pour this through a strainer into this one and see how much liquid I get. Because remember, because the mushrooms are in there, it changes the volume. Oh, and that's perfect. I thought so. Let's see. Always thinking. All right. So this turned out to be a little over 2.5 cups. We want about 5 cups of liquid. I'm gonna pour that in. And that's important. That's just so we want that to sit there. I'm gonna get a spoon. I'm gonna stir this. I'm gonna add half a stick of butter that I melted, okay? And we're gonna stir that around, and some salt. Ooh, see, you guys are in the salt shelf. Ooh, ooh. I almost dropped my phone everywhere. I'm gonna put in like a half a teaspoon of salt, because I make my own chicken stock. It doesn't have any salt in it. That's a little bit, but very little. Oh, and I forgot to show you what I'm using. Well, I'll show you when I show you. the whole thing. Now, see, I've still got all these mushrooms here, and I'm going to chop those up and put those in there too. But first, let me show you how this. I'm using kind of one of the big Pyrexes, right? Okay, and it's just kind of. I'm actually going to put this over on the stove, just to sit here, and it's going to sit. See, make sure you don't slosh it. It's going to sit there for 3 hours. Okay, doing its thing. Then I'm going to keep the little spoon and lose the strainer. And you know, after we get off camera, I'll chop these up a little bit finer. This is just kind of a mix of different dried mushrooms. There's some chanterelles in there, and some oyster mushrooms, and morels, and you know, looks like there's some porcini in here too. So just a good mix, whatever you find. So the other thing we're gonna do is we are gonna get our duck ready. Now, if I should have done this probably yesterday. And if you take it out of its wrapper and you score the skin and put it back in the fridge, then it kind of air chills it and it tightens up the skin a little bit. I am not going to either do the method where you pour the boiling water over it to tighten up the skin. I'm not going to do that. You don't have to do that. What we're going to do, all right, so let me just finish telling you about the rice. So when this is all, after you've soaked it for 3 hours, it cooks covered for an hour. And then you take off the foil or whatever and check it and see if it needs a little more, you know, if it's got too much liquid, then let it cook a little bit longer. If it doesn't have enough, you add a little bit, because you don't want it crispy. You don't want it dry. You want it sort of like a peel-off consistency, okay? And that's it. That's fine. That's going to sit there for 3 hours. Now the duck, I have in this roasting pan with a rack, okay? And, you know, duck usually comes to you frozen. You know, when we lived in San Francisco and we lived really close to Chinatown, we could get fresh duck, like really fresh, like they'll kill it for you. But this is not that. This was in the freezer. You need to take it out a few days in advance and let it defrost in the freezer, in the fridge. And, you know, you can do the drying out method. I don't have time for that, but there's always a fix, right? But what I am going to do is, again, so the duck has a lot of fat in it. And I'm going to cook this kind of hot and fast, okay? I'm going to cook it like at 400, 425 for about an hour. I'm going to cook it first, breast side down, okay, for like a half hour. And then I'm going to flip it over for a half hour. And that's kind of it. The only decision-making process there is what you want to use to glaze it. But first, what we're going to do is I'm going to let it sit out a little bit, because when I went to pull the livers and stuff out of the carcass, which I'm going to cook for lunch, I noticed it still had a little ice inside, and you know that feeling. So I'm going to score it. I'm going to leave it out instead of putting it back in the fridge, and it'll be fine. I might put it back in the fridge, you know, in an hour when it's kind of settled down. But so I'm just going to score the skin a little bit. You don't want to go too deeply. You know, you can do a crosshatch pattern like you would do for a ham, but you don't want to pierce the meat. Okay, see, like that. You got me? Now I'm going to turn it over. And, you know, some people say to trim off the extra fat, but I don't know why you would do that, because that fat's great. And what you can do is at the end, if you want to keep your duck fat, you can strain it off into a container, and the fat and put it in the fridge, and the fat will separate from the liquid, and you can scrape it off and get rid of the liquid and keep the fat and use it for something else. So let me just score the back of it. And I'm actually going to leave it. Oh, right, what I was saying before about the freezing. One of the things with freezing meat, I'm sure you've noticed this before, like if you freeze a steak, it exudes more liquid. Why? Well, because it has, all those cells have ruptured in the freezing process. So meat that's been frozen exudes more liquid. So that's one of the reasons why you kind of want to dry it out a little bit. So while you're cooking it, you might have to go in and like tip it up and get some of the liquid out of the cavity. All right. So let me wash. No, that's not what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take my clean hand and I'm gonna get some salt, and I'm going to rub it all over with salt. Oh shoot! Now both my hands are dirty. Hold on. We can talk a little bit about what you want to glaze it with. I'm a little short on time, not terrible. You remember in the fall when we made the prunes in Armagnac? I am going to use these for the duck. Now, you can use something like apricot jam. You can use, my Aunt Connie of the Blue Cheese Ball used to do like duck sauce or plum sauce. You know, you can use all kinds of stuff on it. But the problem is that as I said, I'm gonna do this hot and fast. I do not want anything with too much sugar because it will burn. And we want a crispy skin. We do not, look, Winston's having trouble with the big pile of toy boxes back there, which I've already taken 4 trips down to the alley with the, anyway. You don't want it to burn. So this is a nice, you know, kind of liquid consistency. I'm going to cook some of the prunes around it. Another nice thing you can do if you were not making rice casserole is you can put some cut up like halved baby potatoes under here and make duck fat potatoes. You know, you can do a lot of things. I'm going to put some pepper on this. But what you want to do is when you turn it, you want to baste it a few times with your thing, whether it's the apricot glaze that you make. You can thin it out with some water or whiskey or something like that. You can just use soy sauce. You can use like the liquid aminos mixed with something. You could there are a ton of things you could do. But anyway, point is, you want something that's not too sugary. So if you use something like this apricot jam, just cut it with something. But I'm gonna let it just sit here salted for the next couple hours. And it should tighten up a little bit. But if you cook it hot and fast, you don't have to worry about all this pouring boiling water over it or like blanching it and all that kind of stuff. That fat will render off and it will brown up for you. And if it's not brown enough, just keep it going. It's not as bad as like a turkey or something where you can really overcook it. Again, because duck has so much fat in it, it kind of saves it a little bit. But I've seen recipes that tell you to cook it for like 2.5 hours, and it's far too long. You want it like an hour and a half. This is a 6-pound duck, and that's all that it takes. The difficult thing here is that the rice needs to cook at a lower temperature. So sometimes, you know, I might cook the rice earlier and then do the duck and then put the rice back in to warm up while the duck is resting. You know, that's something you can do too. And then I'll put some of these prunes around it in its last little bit and maybe have some on some vanilla ice cream too. I'm trying to think what else if you want to stuff it, it just takes a little bit longer because you want to make sure it's done inside. And since mine still had a little ice inside, it makes me nervous. So soak your rice. Remember, it's 2 cups of rice, 5 cups of liquid, some mushrooms, some shallots, butter, half a stick of butter. And then the duck, score it, cook it, breast side down for a half hour, breast side up for a half hour. And if you need to cook it any longer, keep it breast side up with, you know, basting it with your liquid, whatever you're gonna use, okay? I hope that helps. I hope you have a wonderful Christmas. You know, we're a small group, so that's, you know, why you use a duck. If you wanna feed more than like 4 people, you need 2 ducks.